Papa Zero here once again, and today I got a beautiful trigger fire spells on hit poison Pathfinder build to showcase. Alright, I have about 14,000 words in this essay, so I'm going to try to go through this fairly quick. Sorry for rambling on. Okay, a few weeks back I made a crit-based power charge stacking Slayer build that utilized the trigger a socketed fire spell on hit runecraft. But on that build, I used Wave of Conviction and Purifying Flame as my main damage dealing spells. On this build, I am using the same runecraft, however, I have built the character in the most different of ways possible. Initially though, I was planning on using the same exact axe, but the starting POB DPS was bad, so I needed a new axe. Scouring the Path of Exile trade site patiently, I waited till I could buy a cheap one that had the runecraft on it already, and then I proceeded to craft it myself. Not the best, but it does exactly what I needed to do, and even the lightning resistance is relevant. More on that later. Because of the Perfect Agony passive node, I went for much crit. I went for as much crit multi as possible, which then gets converted into dot crit multi, and that's where a lot of the damage comes from. So it is imperative to have as much critical strike chance on these spells as possible. Otherwise, they deal no damage. No good. If they don't crit, they don't do any damage. Once again, testing as many fire spells as possible, I felt the best clear and single target DPS were the three skills socketed in my axe right now, which are Firestorm, Volatile Dead, and the Detonate Dead of Chain Reaction. Pre-POB, the combination of spells I picked may not be the highest DPS in certain situations, but again, ultimately, I always go for what feels the best, not what the POB's DPS sheet states. Another reason why I chose these three spells instead of, say, just two of them is because I want to hit my enemies as quickly as possible with as many hits as possible, because they only get poison if they have 3 or more grasping vines on their person. And this being a poison build, poison your enemies, folks. It's the right thing to do. Now, in order for me to trigger VD and DD, I needed corpses on the battlefield, and the only reliable way for me to do that is through Cast on Critical Strike Desecrate. In my opinion, Lancing Steel of Spraying is the best applicator for the COC, and hence why I'm using it. I will show you a small clip of this later on, but initially I was testing Spell Cascade, and it was dang near impossible to play because it would trigger approximately 1.9 million corpses per second, and my PC was dying. Yeah, could not handle it. I ended up replacing it with Faster Attack Support Gem, which made my attack speed feel fantastic. With that said, if you have a Siege Axe or maybe 1.6, 1.7 or greater attack speed on your axe, then by all means get yourself a Returning Projectile Gem support instead, and it's going to feel even better. I did also test out Cyclone and using Cast While Channeling Support Gem to trigger Desecrate, where I wouldn't need a high crit chance in my melee setup. This did give me some flexibility in my 6-link setup, but I had to be right on top of my enemies to hit them with my axe anyways, and I also lost Arctic Armor physical damage reduction benefit because I was constantly moving. Also, even though the clear speed for mobs felt fine, the overall single target DPS was noticeably worse. Defensively, I went for the combination of Divine Flesh, which is granted by the Glorious Vanity Timeless Jewel, Purity of Lightning Sublime Vision Prismatic Jewel, and Purity of Lightning Watcher's Eye Jewel. Currently, my build with Topaz Flask up has 90% lightning resistances and 87 chaos resistance. It is very easy to get 90% chaos resistance, but I would have to give up something for it because I need a 3% mana reservation efficiency jewel to not have to take the charisma passive wheel, which saved me 3 points. But that is why I have negative fire and cold resistances, because 99% of those elements are taken as chaos or lightning. Honestly though, it was a struggle to get the necessary lightning res to 80. I even had to use tattoos. Mind you, that's if I'm running a Quicksilver Flask for zooming through tier 16s. If, for example, you want to play this build and are purely going for tier 17s or bossing content, or just want that extra survivability, then you basically do not need any lightning resistances from your gear because it will be more than overcapped by the Topaz Flask. With that out of the way, for our livelihood, we rely on the Master Surgeon's Ascendancy node, which grants us 2600 life recovery per second as long as we have that life flask running. This amount of recovery also translates to our energy shield recovery thanks to Replica Sorrow of the Divine Sulfur Flask, which also grants Eldritch Battery, which enables us to cast all of our spells very easily. The side benefit of this is also we generally don't worry about any kind of degen at all. Lastly, we have basically 100% spell suppression, and I use the Doppelganger guys for 39% less physical damage taken. That, along with Arctic Armor, goes a decent way to survive versus physical hits. And yeah, that's about it. Sorry for rambling. I'm not gonna go over the gear at all, really, because I basically mentioned what's kind of happening with this setup already with the build, but I will kind of talk about the interactions and some swap ins, swap outs, different things you can kind of do if you wanted to take this another direction. Okay, I've covered just about everything, all the interactions, most of them, but something to kind of consider. For the longest time I was using just rare gloves with some quality of life, some resistances, some life, before I got these for 1 divine, but then I had to cast the Despair Curse and Templar Chain Curse via Arcanus brand. So for 99% of content, I wouldn't be actually doing additional damage from the 2 curses because I would only cast it on bosses. So something to kind of consider there, but you can get some nice quality of life and really save some passive points on suppress. Something else to kind of consider is maybe you want a defensive helm. So look for +1 lightning, suppress, strength, intelligence, goes a long way. Versus I ended up doing Blizzard Crown with the mana reservation and the jewel, which enabled me to, again, not having to go for the charisma passive cluster. Or you can consider, maybe getting an onslaught on hit, synthesized ring, and then have the Herald of Agony mana reservation efficiency, which would also kind of help out where you need to be in terms of mana. This was a self-crafted ring that I used for quite a while until I decided to, once again, for the 3rd time, recraft my Onslaught ring that I bought week 1 or something of the league. Something else to consider, but you would have to invest heavily into flask charges and the duration, is the Burden of Truth Crystal Belt. With this, you would gain the Supreme Decadence. You could potentially get yourself the Eldritch Battery just for 2 points, which would then enable you to drop the Replica Sorrow of Divine Flask. It's all great in theory, but again, you would have to invest quite a bit more into flask charges versus now. With this right here, I didn't really have to do too much of an investment besides basically the Tides of Time belt, but then you lose out on a ton of the life and ES recovery. I think it drops it down maybe by half. I think I go to like 1100 or 1000 per second, which is still great, but right now it's pushing 2600. So again, something to kind of consider. Definitely consider crafting your own rings. The Herbalist Tawawa tattoos. So I did end up getting quite a few of them. Absolutely not necessary. You definitely don't have to spend 1 or 2 divines for all of these. I just did it, and I'm still bad at this, but I did it so instead of pressing this flask every 6 seconds or so, I have to press it about 8 seconds. That being said, when you watch the footage, you see me clicking it every 0.3 seconds. So kind of pointless. So again, don't waste your time spending unless you need it for the other flasks, which if you have the same exact setup as I do, you do not need these tattoos. Something else to kind of consider is maybe a Megalomaniac Cluster Jewel for the Born of Chaos. Maybe you can get yourself some nice quality of life, maybe Purity of Lightning, increased mana reservation, something like this, but with the Purity of Lightning version, and then Peak Vigor or whatever. And yeah, that's basically gonna do it. I mean, I think I basically covered everything from head to toe. So if you have any questions, feel free to comment below. Did that just rhyme? Did I just make a rhyme up? I think I did. Yup. All right. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys later. Bye. Oh yeah, just real quick. So when you're trying to look for the Glorious Vanity Jewel, I mean, you can kind of see I have the +1 chaos resistance here. I have like a 4.3% DPS increase right here, but I just don't, have enough points right now. Maybe next level I'll take it. I also chose to get the spell suppression and all res right here. So when you look through all of these, you know, different glorious vanity things, I mean, definitely look for the ones that are kind of 1 or 2 points away. I could have gotten a max light resistance right there, for example. I have some spell suppression here, so definitely, you know, don't settle. Take, you know, good half hour or 3 days like I did, and look for a nice jewel that's gonna make a world of difference. Alright, so here's just a really quick clip of me basically having Spell Cascade in my Cast on Crit setup, and as you can see, I mean, for me, for my setup, I mean, it was just bogging down, and honestly, it kind of looks like majority of those corpses get wasted anyway. I don't think it's worth it. Play around, maybe it will be for you, who knows, but I think faster attacks support gem or the returning projectiles support gem is definitely way to go. Nice! Getting ever so closer to getting under 3 hours with this leveling setup. Nice.